Hi, I am Andrea Hazard, author of the Step-by-Step Reading Program. Welcome to part 2 of my series on how to teach your child to read, Building a House of Literacy. In part 1, I described how to build a reading pathway in the brain. In part 2, I'm going to describe the 5 pillars of reading education identified by the National Reading Panel. The 5 pillars of reading education include phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Phonemic awareness is the ability to identify the individual sounds in spoken language, which are called phonemes. A beginner reader must learn to break words apart into sounds because letters represent sounds. Phonics describes how letters represent sounds. Fluency is the ability to read with speed, accuracy, and appropriate expression. A child who reads fluently will not stumble over words and will know whether they need to raise their voice at the end of a sentence to indicate that a question is being asked. Vocabulary is an understanding of the meaning of words. Comprehension is the ability to understand and interpret text. The pillar analogy is useful because it shows that these 5 aspects of reading education are equally important, but in some ways I think a house analogy is more apt. If literacy is a house, phonemic awareness and phonics form the foundation, which is reinforced through development of fluency. Vocabulary forms the walls of the literacy house, and comprehension forms the roof. Phonemic awareness and phonics form the foundation of the house of literacy because these skills enable the reader to build a reading pathway in the brain. This pathway, which I described in detail in part 1 of this series, is the same for all skilled readers. It begins in the vision center, where an area called the letterbox region identifies letters in written text. Information about letters is then sent to the language center of the brain by 2 different routes, the sound route and the word route. Sound route matches letters to the sounds they represent, allowing a reader to sound out words. The word route retrieves words, or word parts, from memory. The word route is faster, but can only be used after a reader has committed the spelling of a word to memory, using the sound route. Beginner readers who have not yet memorized any words must use the sound route. The sound route cannot be built until a reader develops phonemic awareness and an understanding of phonics rules. Thus, these 2 skills are foundational to forming a reading pathway in the brain. When a child first learns to read, their understanding of phonemic awareness and phonics rules is weak. The literacy foundation is not very stable, which means they will read haltingly and make many mistakes. But with time and practice, the mistakes become fewer and the reading more solid. The child also begins to recognize when a question is being asked or when a particular emphasis needs to be placed on a piece of text. At this point, they have developed fluency. Thus, fluency is a foundational skill that results in the solidification of phonemic awareness and an understanding of phonics. A strong foundation is necessary to anchor walls of vocabulary and a roof of comprehension. The house analogy is useful in describing how the different aspects of reading education are related to one another. However, this is not to say that these skills should be developed sequentially. In fact, development of comprehension skills and a strong vocabulary should begin early, before a child can decode fluently. This way, the child will be able to recognize words as soon as they can decode them, and they will also have a better understanding of what they are reading. In part 1 of this series, I described how to develop phonemic awareness and an understanding of phonics. In the remainder of part 2, I will describe how to develop fluency, comprehension, and a strong vocabulary. Fluency is the ability to read with accuracy, speed, and expression. Reading out loud has been shown to be more effective than silent reading for development of fluency. Children should receive feedback as they read so that they can learn about and correct any mistakes that they make. Repetition is also important. Students should read the same passage over and over until they make no mistakes. They should also read different kinds of material, including fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. At home, parents can help their child develop fluency by listening to them read out loud and by helping them with words that they struggle to decode. In the classroom, fluency building can be more challenging as all students will need a chance to get feedback while they read out loud. One way to do this is to ask one child to read to another. Partners will have to be selected carefully, as reading ability, as well as the ability to give useful feedback, varies. Students who particularly struggle can be paired with a teacher or teacher's aide. Development of vocabulary should begin well before formal schooling begins, as young children have a tremendous ability to retain and understand words. Parents and teachers can aid this natural vocabulary development simply by reading aloud books with a rich vocabulary and by talking about different topics. When reading aloud, it is a good idea to ask the child if they know the meaning of uncommon words. For example, if a passage reads, "The snake slithered through the grass," ask them what the word slither means. To reinforce learning, ask them to mimic a slithering movement. When a child reaches school age, vocabulary building can be enhanced through formal instruction. However, studies show that simply parroting a definition does not work. Best practices for learning vocabulary include teaching multiple definitions, using the word in different sentences, and showing how words are related to one another. Showing word relationships should be done in two different ways. First, students should be taught to break words apart into roots, prefixes, and suffixes, and to recognize words that have the same root. Second, children should learn semantic webs, which are groups of related words. Let's use the word murmur to show how to put some of these best practices to work. First, we will define the word murmur in different ways. As a noun, murmur can mean a low continuous sound, a mumbled expression or complaint, or an abnormal sound of the heart. A student who learns all three definitions will understand that the essence of this word is an indistinct, quiet noise. And they will understand that the verb form of this word means to make an indistinct noise. But it is not enough to simply provide definitions of this word. Students must be shown how the word is used in different sentences, such as "the wind murmured through the trees," "we could hear a murmur of voices coming from the room," and "the doctor says Tom has a heart murmur." Murmur belongs to a semantic web of words that describe ways of speaking. Other words in this web include whisper, mutter, talk, utter, cry, yell, shout, scream, bellow, and roar. When words are introduced in a web, they can be compared to assess subtle differences in meaning. A comparison of whisper and murmur will show that both words describe quiet noises, but that a whisper is more likely to be distinct and understandable. Thus, whisper is the best choice for the sentence, "Jill and John whispered because they did not want the teacher to hear," while murmur is the best choice for the sentence, "Jill murmured to herself as she did the puzzle." Comprehension is the ability to understand something. Oral comprehension is similar to reading comprehension with one key difference. To comprehend written text, you must be able to decode it accurately. Thus, a primary best practice for gaining reading comprehension is development of fluency. To emphasize the importance of fluency on reading comprehension, David Didau created a video in which he shows the sentence, one word at a time, as he is talking. He then asks the viewer to answer several questions about the sentence they just read. When I watched the video, I was able to read each word, but couldn't remember the words I had read before. Thus, I had no understanding of the sentence that was just read and couldn't answer a single question. This is what non-fluent readers must do all the time. They must decode each word individually and then try to remember how all the words fit together into a sentence. By the time they reach the last word in a sentence, they likely will have forgotten many of the words they just decoded. In contrast, fluent readers can decode effortlessly, which frees up working memory to retain information about groups of words that describe a particular idea. As they gain fluency, children should read often and read a wide variety of content, including fiction and nonfiction. Reading familiarizes children with the formality and structure of written language, which can differ from that of spoken language. Young children should listen to text read aloud, and this text should increase in complexity as they gain fluency. Students who lag behind in development of decoding skills should be provided with recordings of text so they become familiar with the flow of text that they cannot yet read. A great deal of research has been done to determine if content knowledge and a strong vocabulary play a role in reading comprehension. The results are mixed, with a recent study indicating that these two factors may not play as strong a role in reading comprehension as previously suggested. Nevertheless, development of content knowledge and a strong vocabulary enhances overall learning. For example, a child who reads about dinosaurs will gain knowledge of geology and learn words such as fossil and extinct. Another best practice for gaining comprehension is reciprocal learning, which involves predicting, clarifying, questioning, and summarizing text. Younger children can do this orally. Older children can do this through written analysis, by story mapping, making graphic organizers, or writing reports. A final best practice for gaining comprehension is writing original content. In doing so, students will gain a deeper understanding of how to explain something, which will in turn help them comprehend material that is being explained to them. In conclusion, literacy can be compared to a house that must be built. Phonemic awareness and phonics form the foundation of this house. This foundation is solidified by repetition, resulting in fluency. As this foundation is being built, a solid vocabulary should be developed, which will form the walls of the house. A strong foundation and solid walls will hold a roof of comprehension. That concludes part 2 of my series on how to teach your child to read. Visit stepbystepreaders.com to learn about my reading curriculum. You can try Step 1 for free by selecting Level A, Step 1 under the Free tab. Thanks for listening.